Question
Speaker.
number 12, Rino Tirikatene.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister for the Environment. Does he accept that consultation with Māori was inadequate prior to the announcement of the Kermadec Sanctuary? And if so, will he now apologise for that mistake?
Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
No, I do note the member's party committed to establishing the sanctuary in 2014 prior to any consultation with iwi or TOKM.
Supplementary.
Order.
To the Minister.
Supplementary question, Rino Tirikatene.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Minister, what compromise is he offering, if any, that would allow the Kermadec Sanctuary to go ahead without running roughshod over Māori fishing rights?
Mr.
The
Speaker.
Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Mr. Speaker, if you're going to have an ocean sanctuary, it needs to be an area in which there is not mining or fishing for it to have integrity. And the challenge we have with it and other marine protected areas around New Zealand is not just in terms of quota rights of Māori, but quota rights of others. I don't think it is a sustainable position to say that non-Māori fishers who have fished in that area for the last 20 years cannot, but Māori who have not been fishing can.
Mr. Speaker?
Point of order, Rino Tirikatene.
I asked the Minister what compromise is he offering?
No, on this occasion, I don't agree. The question has been addressed. I accept not to your satisfaction, but if the member wants to continue with subs, he's welcome to do so. But if you'd rather move on, I'm happy to do that as well. Supplementary question, Rino Tirikatene.
Why has he put the future of the Kermadec Sanctuary at risk by disrespecting Māori, taking away treaty settlement rights, no recognition of loss, and refusing a reasonable compromise?
Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Mr. Speaker, in my discussions with TOKM, the only Kermadec Ocean Sanctuary legislation that they were prepared to accept was one that the fishing ban specifically exempted TOKM and enabled them at their choice to be able to fish at any time in the future. In my view, that would not be a Kermadec Ocean Sanctuary that had integrity, and that is why we were not able to reach agreement. We have said we're going to have ongoing discussions with the Māori Party. In my view, it would be the right thing for New Zealand and this Parliament to still establish that sanctuary.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Rino Tirikatene.
To the Minister, why does he think Māori property rights are dispensable after he ignored Ngāti Whātua over Crown land last year and is now trying to extinguish Māori fishing rights this year? Is it disrespect or just flat-out incompetence? What is his problem with Māori?
Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Mr. Speaker, I would quote from the policy that member campaigned on in the last election, because in that it sets out where Labor would create a World Ocean Sanctuary.
Order. No, I haven't been able to hear the answer because of the yelling coming from my left-hand side. It is to cease, and the Minister can now give his answer.
Mr. Speaker, the policy that very member campaigned on at the last election was to provide a Kermadec Ocean Sanctuary by special legislation.
Order. I'll listen to the point of order, but if there's one to suggest that there's no ministerial responsibility, the member will be wasting his time. I'll invite the members before he raises, if that's the point. When you ask a question like that and you effectively accuse a minister of incompetence, which was the words used in the question, it gives a very wide licence for the answer. I will hear from Lees-Galloway.
Well, so what is the ministerial responsibility for opposition policy?
Order. I've explained that. If the member had only bothered to listen before he raised his point of order. The Honourable Dr Nick Smith. Now
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order, the Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
I seek leave of the House to table Labor's 2014 policy.
No. Order! If Mr Smith wants to stay for the balance of question time, I acknowledge it's not long, when I rise to my feet, I expect the Minister to sit down. There's been one other occasion where it happened a second day, and that member, that particular person was ejected from the House. The same rules will apply to Dr Nick Smith. Now, does the member want to the Minister want to give his answer?
No, I was seeking leave, Mr. Speaker.
No, and I said I'm not prepared to put the leave. That information was publicly available to any member who wants it.
Parliamentary.
Further supplementary question, Rino Tirikatene.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. After running aground yet another government policy, will he excuse himself from further negotiations with Te Ohu Kaimoana so that the Kermadec Sanctuary can go ahead, or will he go down with the ship?
Mr Speaker.
Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Mr Speaker, I've been involved in creating 18 different marine protected areas around New Zealand. For instance, in Akaroa, every one of the ones I've been involved in, there has been some bumps and there has been some controversy. I think the reality is that people are reluctant to give up their rights to mine, to recreationally fish or to commercially fish, and I'm equally confident in this case with time we'll find a solution.
And that concludes questions.